So let's talk about the MCU again. So I made it very clear that I'm a massive fan of the MCU. If a 2-hour long ranking video and rewatching every project including the 6 to 8 hour long television series wasn't clear enough, then I don't know what will. But something I wasn't very clear on in that video was that I'm a massive MCU fan to a point. Since Endgame, I was wondering what the future of the MCU will hold, and honestly, hot take, I think most of the 2021 projects range from good to great, with a few exceptions like Black Widow, What If, and Eternals, culminating in No Way Home, which is still one of my top 2 favorite MCU projects ever. I made that video with hope for the future, but reflecting back, I may have put too much hope into this franchise. Most of the 2022 projects didn't impress me all that much. Moon Knight was cool in its first half, but ran on longer than it needed to in its first. Doctor Strange 2 had some cool Sam Raimi elements, but a script that felt rushed out and messy. Ms. Marvel was cute with its family dynamics and really likable main character, but like Moon Knight, felt very padded out and unnecessarily long. Thor 4 is a very enjoyable mess, but still a very disappointing mess. And Black Panther 2 was a good send-off to Chadwick, but didn't have as much engagement as the first film for me. And leading into this year, we had Ant-Man 3, which has gotten much worse over time, and I was very nice to it giving a 6, but it's more like a 5 now, and right in between the other 2 Ant-Man movies for me. Weirdly enough, my favorite projects to come out of the MCU post No Way Home was the special presentations. Werewolf by Night had some fantastic direction and gave me the MCU horror I was seeking from Multiverse of Madness. And then there was the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, which was just such a joy of a Christmas special and was honestly the stress reliever I needed after the most taxing year of the MCU for me. So why am I bringing this all back up? Why am I reminiscing so much on the past when we should move on from what the MCU was to what it is now? Isn't it just a shadow of its former self? Well, I did think like that, and to a degree I still do. But then I watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And I'm gonna be honest here, this is not only my favorite project from the MCU since No Way Home, but one of the best MCU projects, period. To me, James Gunn has created the perfect series within the MCU. While I love other series like the Captain America trilogy, the Homecoming trilogy, and the Avengers quadrilogy, there's at least one movie in those series that I would say is not one of my top favorites, like the first Avenger, Homecoming, and Age of Ultron. Not bad movies, I mean Homecoming has really grown on me as time's gone on, but the others are definitely somewhere in the middle or bottom tiers of the MCU. But with the Guardians movies, not one is really lesser in quality than the others. Even the holiday special has become one of the most enjoyable and impactful movies in the MCU, despite being only a third of the other movies' runtimes. But the first movie is an excellent introduction to these characters, gave them a fun adventure around the galaxy, and proved that the MCU can successfully pull off strange and unconventional movies that can resonate with anyone. Guardians 2 is even better with its firm message of found family, improved direction and visuals, and having one of the best third acts in any comic book movie, period. And now we have the third movie, and it takes everything great about the other films and turns it up to 11. The visuals and direction are the best they've ever been, with some of the most striking imagery in the franchise. The action is so well choreographed, showing how far both the on and off-screen teams have come from the first film. The story, while struggles in the first act to find its footing, eventually gets to a point where I get so emotionally invested into what was happening that I just couldn't stop watching. And the characters are so well realized here, for the most part. I must ask, what was happening with Adam Warlock in this film? His character perplexes me the most because I just don't know what to feel about him in this film. His introduction was just so fast. He comes to fuck shit up, then fucks off for a while, and then just returns whenever he pleases. But then we'll have moments where he shows empathy, but like, when did that happen? I feel like there's another cut out there with more scenes that organically shows Warlock's growth, but until we get it, I'll just sit here and ponder his role in the story, besides one aspect that I can't spoil. But besides him and some pacing issues at the beginning, I really only have good things to say about this film. Going back to the characters, we see how much they've grown over these years just from the opening scene, and immediately we know that the end is near and that they must find some sense of independence at one point or another. We see throughout the film points where they make choices that would better themselves as people and what may be in store for their future. Along with that, we see them reflect on how they got to this point, most evidently seen with Rocket's backstory. Without spoiling anything, that was so fucked and dark and emotionally brutal to watch that it immediately made me understand why he is the way he is far better than the previous films did. Also, if you're an animal lover, this movie will probably ruin your day, so do be warned. This also makes the villain so hateable. I see a lot of people dissing the villain in this film for not being that dimensional, and while I see where they're coming from, I also kinda like that we get a straight up evil villain. He reminds me of the days where a lot of Disney villains were just despicably demented that made them so interesting and memorable as a result. And that's sort of how I feel here. While not a fun villain to watch, we see how irredeemable he really is and how ultimately fucked his actions are that we can't help but find him memorably evil, and we immediately root for the Guardians to ground his ass. I mean, hey, it's still better than lame ass Ronin. Lastly, I could see people complaining about the third act being a little too reminiscent to the second film's conclusion, but I think they're narratively and thematically different enough for me, and honestly, even with that in mind, I still found it to be so tense and exciting and emotionally draining that I just don't care. It's at least on par with the second film's conclusion, and I found it to be the perfect end for these characters. If they decide to include them more in the future, it wouldn't be surprising, but for at least now, I think their story's ending is perfect the way it is. This movie's a miracle. In a streak of safe and sometimes mediocre material the MCU has been on lately, we got a genuinely beautiful and emotionally resonating movie that stands on par with some of the best the MCU has to offer. To me, this movie gets a strong 9 out of 10 and is now one of my top 3 favorite projects in the MCU. While the MCU still needs a few more hits for it to be on my good graces entirely, at least for now, I can take solace that this film worked out well in the end. Bye!